Hey there, mystery knit-alongers. This is Mary Annarella of Lyrical Knits, and I'm here to do a tutorial that is a part of the As You Wish mystery knit-along, and this is a stitch that I'm affectionately calling the Fire Swamp stitch. Let me zoom in a little bit. I mean, you knew coming into this was going to be a bit of a spoiler for the first clue, but here is what that little stitch ends up looking like over here. This one's complete. Now I'm going to show you where to put another one in. Now this is just a reminder that the Fire Swamp stitch is totally optional. You can put it in as directed if you want, or you can leave it out and just do all plain garter for this. Now this is a little bit of a mess because instead of a stitch holder, I just put my reserve stitches on another needle just because I think that's easier for me, but it does make things look a little messy. So let's show you how to do this. So I'm going to knit up to the spot that the pattern says to knit to. There we go. And then the directions say knit one stitch, and then to knit into the 5th stitch below the next stitch. So let's count these up a little bit. There's a 1 stitch, 2 stitch, 3 stitch, 4 stitch, 5 stitch. But let me show you yet another way to figure this out. Basically, the 5th stitch is below the 3rd garter ridge. So here's one garter ridge here, here's a 2nd garter ridge, and here's the 3rd. And if I stretch open that 3rd one, that is the stitch that I want to go into right there. So, but we can count it this way if you like to. So stitch 1, stitch 2, stitch 3, stitch 4, stitch 5, insert your needle into it, draw a loop through as if to knit. And I like to keep it loose, so I give it a nice pull like that. Then you knit 2 stitches and basically draw up a loop as if to knit back into that same spot that you did that first dip stitch. So it's kind of funky to go and put your needle back into that same hole, but again, you don't have to count how many stitches down again because you already did that stitch, that dip stitch into it. So I'm going to go back in there, draw out my loop, and again, I'm going to try and loosen it up a little bit because I tend to just pull things a little too tight. So I'm just kind of being a little loosey-goosey with that. Okay, and I will be right back when I come back to it on the wrong side row. Okay, so I have worked the wrong side, and you are looking at the wrong side of the fabric, although it looks pretty much like garter stitch, but like that's the back side of one of the Fire Swamp stitches. This is definitely the back side of the work. And I have almost knit to the point where the first dip stitch that I come to is. And there it is there. You can see how there's a little gap. I mean, you can see that this right here where my thumb is pointing to, my left thumb, is that hole, the stitch that we drew up those long dip stitches from. So I am almost to that point where I have to do something different. So I'll knit to that. All right, and now I am at the first dip stitch, and if I want to turn it over and take a look, I can say, yeah, there is a dip right there. So I purl those two together. Okay, so purl those together. Go, knit the next stitch. And then here's my second dip stitch here. I'm going to purl the next 2 stitches together. Right there. All right. Now we are not quite done with the Fire Swamp stitch, because we have to do something on this next right side row. Kidderk. So, see, there's what we have so far. It looks like, they look like little rabbit ears. So let's knit up to that point. So I'll knit up to, again, where I did that very first dip stitch. That was the first dip stitch. So I'll knit 1, knit 2. Now I'm going to draw up a loop from that same stitch, that same little hole again, right there. That's going to be my last plume of fire. Again, try to keep it loose. Don't make it tight or it won't look as fire swampy. And then just knit to the end. And you don't have to do anything special on the wrong side row. You're just going to knit those all over again. So that's pretty much it for the tutorial. But just to show you again what it looks like right here. Here's a finished one, and I have obviously worked a few more rows past it. And it looks like sort of a plume of fire from the fire swamp. You know it's coming up when you hear the click. Okay, so there actually is one last little bit to do for this fire swamp stitch. Sorry about that. I have worked this is the wrong side again, and I am knitting, just regular garter stitch, up to that dipped stitch. And up there it is. And if you want to turn your work over to see that that is indeed the dip stitch, that's it right there. And you just simply purl those two together and then knit the rest of your stitches to the end of the row. Apologies for that, my bad. So let's take a look at it now. There we go, our little fire swamp stitch. Let's zoom in on that just a bit. Fire swamp stitch. And as you work some more rows, it actually, the center one looks even more elongated. So I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial, and I will see you for the next clue and the next tutorial.